Chapter 3. Myra Sullivan straightened up, pressing her left hand against the small of her own back to ease the pain. It had begun burning right after lunch, but she'd refused to give in to it until she finished the job at hand. As the pain had spread from her back into her hips, then down her legs into her knees, she silently repeated Father Raffaello's adage. Pain is the reward of work well done. Until today, she's never quite understood what the seemingly self-contradictory words meant. After all, how could pain be a reward for anything? But now, as she gazed at the gleaming tile floor, the rectory's kitchen, the meaning became clear, and she nodded with satisfaction. There was not a smear anywhere on the bright yellow glaze of the tile, nor the faintest stain in any of the grout between them. She'd spent the last 3 hours on her hands and knees cleaning those crevices between the tiles with more than a dozen solvents and bleaches. Sighing, she tossed the old toothbrush she'd been using to scrub every inch of the grout until every speck of mildew was gone into the wastebasket at the end of the sink. Tomorrow she would start on the counter, but at least she could stand up for that job. As she admired the work, the pain of her body began to ease, and she recalled Father Raffaello's age again. Though her body ached, her spirit was buoyed by the work she accomplished. Then, glancing at the clock, her spirit sank again. It was already 5:15. She didn't hurry. She wouldn't have Marty's dinner ready on time, and then it wouldn't matter if Father Raffaello might have to say. She'd feel no satisfaction for anything for the rest of the night. Gathering up the bottles of cleaning solvents, she packed into them buckets and took them down the basement. Then she left the rectory by the outside steps, cutting across the backyard and through the gap in the hedge into the back of the duplex, and that fence over to the street. Though half of the duplex that she, Marty, and Angel lived in was cramped, at least they could afford it. Or they could afford it when Marty was working. When he wasn't, which seemed to be most of the time lately, she was able to work off the rent by taking care of the rectory. As she fit her key into the back door, Myra silently chided herself, as she'd been thinking about Marty after all. He'd been working for Jerry O'Donnell for 3 months now, and it looked like the job would be good for at least a year, maybe even a little more. Count your blessings, she heard Father Raffaello whisper in her head. But as the key struck in the lock and she heard the phone ring, words rose in her mind that had nothing to do with blessings at all. She turned away from before, and they were fully formed, just as she tried to run away from all the sin, no matter how slight. She rattled the door, banged on it loudly. A moment later, through the window, she saw Angel appear at the door, and that separated the kitchen from the living room. Her daughter hesitated, as if deciding which was more important, the phone or her mother, then picked up the phone, shrugging helplessly at her. A moment later, Angel put the phone down on the kitchen counter, came across to the door and opened it. "It's Aunt Joni," Angel told her. Myra worked at loosening the jammed key, turning the job of getting the key out over to Angel, and glanced at the clock to see how much time she had before Marty came home. Myra picked up the receiver. "Joni, is this important, or can I call you back?" "I found a house for you," Joni Fletcher replied, and a heavy sigh from her younger sister. "Just listen, all right? And despite what Father Raffaello might say, I'm not Satan sent to tempt you." "He never said you were," Myra said, opening the refrigerator to inspect its contents as she talked to Joni. "But it is a sin, and how many times I do have to tell you that we can't afford a house Finding nothing in the refrigerator that would please her husband, she nudged it closed with her hip. I've got next to no... Her eyes fell on Angel. And then trying to extract the key from the lock in the back door. Just a moment, Joni. Covering the receiver with her hand, she said, get the WD-40 downstairs in the cupboard next to the washer. As Angel disappeared down the stairs to the basement, she turned her attention back to her sister. Sorry, I just didn't want Angel to start worrying. But we don't have any money for a house, Joni. You keep finding houses, and I keep telling you, we've got next to nothing in the bank. But you don't need much, not this time. And the house is perfect. It has 3 bedrooms, and she stopped abruptly, with Myra uttering a brittle laugh. What exactly do you think is so funny about a 3-bedroom house that's only $85,000? She asked coolly when Myra's laughter died away. I'm sorry I laughed, Myra said. But do you have any idea how many houses you've described as perfect? I think you need some new adjectives, which in our case would be things like cozy, meaning small, and fixer-upper, meaning falling down wreck. 85,000, Joni repeated as Angel came back up from the basement with a can of WD-40. And I think they'll come down, way down. And we both know Marty can fix anything he sets his mind to, as long as She abruptly stopped again. But the last 2 words were, stays sober, hung between the 2 women as clearly as if Joni had spoken them aloud. It's all right, Joni, Myra said as the silence threatened to get uncomfortable. We both know what you were going to say. The sad part is, you're right. And not only about what you said, but about what you didn't say too. And if you really wanted to, Marty could fix up the worst house he could find. Myra, I'm telling you, do this. This is the house. Myra paused as the words sank in. Joni had been calling her about houses for almost a year now, and she'd actually gone to look twice, but the houses she could afford, assuming they could qualify for any kind of mortgage at all, were even worse than the duplex they were living in now. And the ones Joni had described as perfect had been so expensive that Myra didn't even bother to go see them, certain that it would only make her feel envious. It can't hurt to look, Joni said, as if sensing Myra's reluctance. And Myra wondered how many times her sister had spoken those exact words to hesitant buyers, only to sell them houses a few hours later, whether they could afford them or not. It wasn't just persistence that had made Joni the most successful agent in her office. She also had an uncanny ability to sense exactly what a customer was looking for, and then find it for him. I don't know, she sighed. It just seems like it's not the right time. It is the right time, Joni Fletcher assured her. I always know these things. I have a sixth sense about them. And I know this is the right house at the right price. And I'm telling you, this one is perfect for you. It's not huge, but I'll think about it, all right? Myra broke in, knowing that once her sister got started, she could go on about a house for 10 or 20 minutes. I've got to get Marty's dinner ready. Okay, Joni agreed reluctantly. But if you don't call me in the morning and tell me when you're coming, I warn you, I'll drive you crazy. And if you don't do that already, Myra shot back, and hung up before her sister could get another word in. She was rummaging through the pantry for something that might pass as dinner, and wishing for once she'd ignored her conscience and splurged on some steaks for Angie's birthday. When she heard her daughter utter a frustrated yelp, "Can't get it out!" "Not turning around. I broke it off," Angel stammered, her voice varying. "Daddy'll..." Abandoning the pantry, Myra hurried to her daughter and took the broken end of the key from her. "Your father won't do anything at all," she promised. "I'll just call a locksmith," and her words died away as she saw Angel's body was shaking and tears were streaming down her face. "For heaven's sake, Angel, don't cry. It's only a broken key. It's not the end of the world." "It's not that." Angie began, her voice, catching on, choking on sobs, but it's just her voice caught again, and then she threw herself into her mother's arms, and her words tumbled out, a rushing torrent. I can't do anything right, and I don't have any friends, and I'm fat and I'm ugly, and I hate everything about my life. I just hate it. You mustn't talk that way, Myra told her, holding Angel so she could look into her eyes. You're not fat. A great many people love you. Who? Angel demanded, her voice muffled as she pressed her face into her mother's chest. I do, and your father does, and Aunt Joni and Uncle Ed, and they're my family, Angel moaned. They have to love me. But the kids... She stopped abruptly. Myra felt her stiffen as if she suddenly decided she didn't want to say any more. What about your friends? She asked. Did something happen at school today? Angel pulled away from her mother, shook her head, and wiped her eyes with her sleeves. What good would it do to try to tell her what happened when her mother didn't understand that she didn't have any friends? What is it, Angel? Myra pressed. It's all right. You can tell me. I'm your mother. But Angel only shook her head like nothing happened. She insisted. I just feel like... She felt silent and then shrugged. I'll be okay. But then they heard the front door slam, followed by Marty Sullivan's slurred voice, and he shouted for Myra. Angel bit her lip. All's at the table, she said, and by the time her father staggered into the room a moment later, she was already pulling the silverware out of the drawer next to the sink. I quit, Marty Sullivan announced, his face red, his voice thick from the half-dozen drinks he had before he came home. Won't work for that son of a bitch O'Donnell anymore. As her husband's words echoed in the kitchen, Myra Sullivan's heart sank. Once again, her husband was drunk. Once again, her husband had been fired. And this time, she doubted that there would be a new job, because she was fairly sure Jerry O'Donnell was the last man left in Eastbury who would give Marty Sullivan a chance. Maybe, after all, it was time to go talk to Joni.